So welcome everyone to a Lumen talk today, a very special one on how to work out and eat for your cycle. So I am with a real expert in fitness, celebrity personal trainer, Don Saladino. Hi, Don.
How are you, Mia? Thanks for having me on.
So Don and I are going to share some information and helpful tips on how you can basically work with your hormones and not against them during your cycle. So learning how to cycle sync your nutrition and workouts to balance your hormones, but also help you feel healthy and happy throughout your menstrual cycle. So Don, are you ready?
Let's go.
Okay, so for the average woman, the cycle's around 28 days, and it varies per woman. Also, the symptoms we experience during each phase also varies. So we're going to give sort of general guidelines around nutrition and what hormones are fluctuating during each phase. Now, there's two main phases to the menstrual cycle. We've got the follicular phase, the first half, and the luteal phase with ovulation in between. So with the follicular phase, let's start with week one. So with week one, the first half of this follicular phase, this is when we're bleeding. And this is a good week to kind of focus on iron-rich foods, red meat, lentils, liver pate, if you can stomach it, spinach. That's going to increase our iron, which we really need during this week. But also important to remember is like vitamin C, for example. That's going to help us sort of support iron absorption in the body. So we also want to kind of look at foods high in vitamin C, like bell pepper, broccoli, citrus. Now, with blood sugar regulation, this is key during this week because our cortisol, that stress hormone, is increasing a little during this week. So we want to kind of focus on slow absorption carbohydrates, also drink plenty of water. We see a lot of women during this week suffer from headaches and migraines. And to be honest, Don and I always give this recommendation to men and women. Just make sure you're drinking enough water during the day. With fitness, now, Don, during this week, every woman's different, but the majority of us, I think are feeling not 100%, right? Feeling a little uncomfortable, maybe a bit tired. We don't really feel like doing much. What is the key message around, how should we work out? How should we incorporate fitness?
100%. First off, I really think we have to back off on the intensity. And on top of that, maybe even the volume. So if your typical workout is taking you, 45 minutes to an hour, there's nothing wrong with scaling back and going in and focusing on some of the compound movements. Now, when I say compound movements, I mean multi-joint exercises that are going to give you a lot of bang for your buck. So I've had plenty of women I've worked with throughout my career that are, will come into a session and they're experiencing something that obviously I've never experienced. But from, gaining information from them, I think just movement in general is going to drastically help out. I think that's going to change one's physiology. And I think as we start almost marinating into that session, it's a term I like to use, where we just take our time, maybe we're warming up, but we're not so regimented to where, there's all this structure and we're timing our sets. I always tell everyone to relax a little bit, marinate into your session, cut the session time in half. If you're feeling terrible and you can go in there right now and give me 15, 20 minutes, I am thrilled with that. But basically focusing on those movements at this time is going to you will progress, but I think also physically and mentally, you're going to be maintaining some of this work you've been putting in. And I think just getting in and moving at a low intensity, getting some steps, staying hydrated, and just trying to lower your expectation on what you need to do today, I think is very important. I think in society today, we get very overwhelmed by a lot of the noise and a lot of these exercise videos and a lot of influencers out there that are putting up this content where they are having to just absolutely crush every session. And that's not the case. It's no one's ever come in to any training session given 110% every session. I mean, I've been, I consider myself world class at this for the last 30 years of my career. And even, I and my training partners, we're always having to scale back and we're always having to adjust to, our environment or maybe different moods we're in or maybe different conditions that we're under. And I think it's a great message for, women out there during that first week to just lower that expectation, back off a little bit, get moving. 9 out of 10 times, I think with lowering that expectation and getting moving, they find that they can kind of come in there and give a little bit more and feel a lot better. But I don't think there's any need to.
Wow, great advice. Great advice. So,
Thank you.
week one covered. Week two looks very different. This is when we are seeing the estrogen increasing just before ovulation. And with the increase in estrogen, right, we've got the insulin sensitivity also increasing. This is a great benefit that estrogen has. It's making us more insulin sensitive. So basically, our bodies are becoming more efficient at burning fat. So great recommendation nutrition wise is, consuming the starchy carbohydrates in the first half of the day to kind of promote this fat burn later on in the day. Also, healthy fats, incorporating healthy fats during this week to support the increasing estrogen. Healthy fat is anyway, in general, great for our hormones. So thinking about omega-3, oily fish, avocados, nuts, is also great. With this week, Don, again, every woman's different, but, our fat burning potential increases during this week. So what sort of fitness can we incorporate that really kind of supports this body that's becoming more efficient at burning fat and is more insulin sensitive?
Well, 100%. I mean, first off, we could probably put our foot on the gas a little bit more, right?
Yeah.
And we can utilize that back off week. So training's funny because technically I would never assign to anyone that I want them to train more intense, more intense, more intense. We really need to do things in ebbs and flows in training. And I think using the menstrual cycle as almost a gauge to back off at specific times during the month and put your foot on the gas has something that I've used to my advantage with a lot of my female clientele for the last, 20 plus years. So I would definitely recommend at this point that, hopefully hopefully the woman is feeling the individual's feeling a lot better and she can start increasing intensity and maybe even volume. So if there was a workout program they were on, if they were doing more high intensity work, if they're feeling good, I'm actually promoting them to put their foot on the gas a little bit and, pick that intensity up. But listen, it's also by a case basis. And I understand, I don't want everyone to listen to this and say, well, Don's saying, well, I have to go intense. I still feel lousy, right? I mean, people are, symptomatic. Women are symptomatic and they have different ranges of how intense their symptoms are. So, I would just recommend that if you're feeling it, it is a great opportunity to put your foot on the gas, especially with having that back off week. You're almost having somewhat of a deload week with your training. Now you can come in with some of that high intensity training. I would definitely recommend to, maybe increasing intensity and volume a little bit.
Yeah.
But if you're feeling lousy, I think consistency trumps intensity always. And I think just getting in there and doing something is going to be very helpful. Everyone comes into this, phase at a different level.
Yeah.
I could be working with a world-class athlete or I could be working with a woman who's just getting started with her training. So I think, again, we have to recognize what is your training age. Training age is really how many years have you been training? If I'm 46 years old, but I've only been training for 30 years and my training age is I'm 30 years old in training. So I think it really depends on your training age. So if you're under 3 years of a training age, you're still somewhat of what I like to call, it's not a scientific term, a newbie. You're still somewhat of a beginner. And, I always recommend maybe backing off a little bit, but if you're more experienced and you could put your foot on the gas, in week 2, then please do.
Great. Yeah. I think it's an important message. Like you said, we're all at a different level of fitness and, everyone's different. So just kind of listening to your body and still staying kind to yourself and doing something, doing anything, even a walk is better than nothing. So I think that's a nice message here. With the next phase, so it's ovulation and, it's around 4 days. And this is, when the body is becoming so less efficient at burning fat, and it's sort of favoritizing carbs for fuel. And it makes sense because during this phase, this is basically our body trying to create a pregnancy, right? A successful pregnancy. So, it's the survival instinct, right? Trying to preserve those fat stores to promote pregnancy and to use carbs for fuel. So with the sort of decrease in insulin sensitivity and this fat burning potential decrease in a little here, With nutrition wise, I think it's really important to sort of focus on slow absorption carbohydrates again. With the insulin sensitivity decreasing, the quinoa, the whole grains, slow absorption carbohydrates are great in every phase, but especially around this phase. And that's going to help us stabilize energy levels, help us stabilize blood sugar levels, making us feel mentally and physically better. With fitness, fat burning potential is decreasing here. If we're feeling great, what sort of workouts promote fat burn here?
Right. Well, scientifically, resistance training is going to raise the amount of calories you burn at rest over cardiovascular training. Mm-hmm. Now, that does not mean I'm going to turn around and tell everyone to drop cardiovascular training. There's a lot of importance for that. I mean, even just from a movement standpoint, burning excessive calories, increasing your changing your physiology, increasing your mood. This is all very important, but it's not the entree, right? I'm going to quote my buddy Ben Bruno, who says resistance training, if your goal is body composition change, resistance training should be the entree and your cardio should be your side dish. So I think that's a big misconception is most women out there will come to me and they say, I don't want to get bigger. Yeah. I don't want to I don't want to put muscle on. And the women that I've worked with in Hollywood and have shown a massive level of success, whether, it's Blake Lively or Annie Hathaway or Emily Blunt or these, Cindy Crawford, who I've helped out with a lot. They have, very feminine, but, feminine physiques, but they're strong. Yeah. And they understood the importance of strength training. So, in general, especially during this phase, if we want to increase the amount of calories we're burning at rest, don't be afraid to put muscle on. And that should be part of the goal. It's just when you think of those, when you hear those terms, you immediately think that a woman's going to turn around having maybe arms like me, which most women aren't going to want to have. I understand that. But it's very difficult to put on muscle. If someone could put on 5 pounds of muscle a year, in that range of 5 to 10 pounds, that's 10 pounds would be extraordinary. 5 pounds of muscle in a year is still, I believe, to be very good. So if we were removing 5 pounds of fat, but putting on 5 pounds of muscle, then technically you're the same weight. So with more muscle, we're going to burn more calories at rest, and our metabolism is going to speed up. And this is one of the, I don't want to say it's the secret, but I think this is one of the things that has been scientifically proven for a long time. And most women just hear the terms putting on muscle and they get afraid. So resistance train, don't be afraid to put muscle on. And, if you feel like you're getting bulkier for some reason, it could be something nutritionally that you're not doing correctly. A lot of times I find it's consuming high inflammatory foods. Yeah. It's drinking too much alcohol. It's eating processed foods. And then we start retaining water, and then they start getting, people start getting a bit puffy. So, keep that nutrition in check. Again, you said fibers, slow burning carbohydrates, consuming those vegetables are also going to slow the absorption down of the carbs that you're consuming. We're adding more fiber into the body. I've been, a big term lately that's obviously been around for, forever is fiber. Most people are starting to pay more attention to it. So I always recommend that minimum of about 25, grams of fiber a day for per woman, 35 for a male. That right there is going to be very helpful.
Brilliant. Yeah. And talking about strength training, I think this will also tie in nicely with the week 3, the next phase. So this is the luteal phase, the second half hour, 28 days roughly. The luteal phase, again, post-ovulation now, is when our progesterone is increasing, our estrogen has decreased. So we've also seen body temperatures slightly higher during this week as well. So I think tying in with the fiber that we're promoting here, but also the fact that our body temperature is a little higher, drinking lots of water is a great place to start here. Also, our blood sugar levels are destabilizing a little here. So again, going back to the slow absorption carbohydrates that are full of fiber, adding those in. Also here we've seen maybe some cravings, increased hunger as well during this week. And that's okay. Like here at Lumen, and also you, Don, right? I mean, if you're hungry, it's the body saying, please fuel me, right? So always listen to your hunger cues. But one tip that we've both seen, right, really has helped a lot of individuals sort of reduce snacking and feel full for longer is getting enough protein. Just looking at every meal and seeing, okay, where is my protein here? Because adequate protein, a lot of individuals will say, wow, we don't need a snack between these meals. And so with week 3 in a woman's cycle, okay, we're hungry a little bit more. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. We need those extra calories. But adding that protein is definitely going to help. And also we see a little increase in muscle breakdown. So the protein is really important to just help build the muscle and preserve it during this phase. Now, going back to what you mentioned during ovulation is, strength training. As people age, we're losing muscle mass naturally. But with this week, especially, and these hormones fluctuating, trying to preserve muscle mass here, like you said, not being afraid to pick up those dumbbells, right? I mean, for anyone sort of starting and they're not strength training at all, what's a good place to start with strength training?
I mean, it depends on what everyone has access to, right? So if you don't have access to a gym, could you access dumbbells? If you don't have access to dumbbells, we can all do a body weight program. It's something that I deliver to people consistently, just at least 15 minutes of work. But I think during this week, during this phase, we really want to focus on some consistency in our training. So I'm not looking for anything too high intense from such a high intensity level. I think restorative yoga, I think maybe even getting into that zone 2 form of cardio where the heart rate could range anywhere. And zones are, there's 5 zones in your cardiovascular training, and they do range according to individuals. But I really feel that 120 beats a minute to about 150, staying in that range, keeping it consistent. For a lot of people, that might be like a very, just relaxed incline walk on a treadmill, or a very slow jog, or some restorative yoga, or even coming into your weight training sessions and just allowing yourself some rest in between sets to be able to recover and recuperate. I think this is what we need to focus on. I definitely would not pull back on the resistance training. We want to preserve muscle mass, but I also understand that adjusting, our intensities is very important.
Great. And also I think going back to metabolism, it's really important to do everything we can nutrition-wise and exercise-wise to, preserve that muscle mass, because it's going to improve our metabolism, right? It's going to improve our ability to shift into carb burn and fat burn. So that's always something we need to bear in mind in every phase of our menstrual cycle. With the final phase, that's the second half of the luteal phase, premenstrual, week 4. So this is a week when, some of us might be a little grumpy. We've got PMS symptoms, we're maybe fatigue, personally, I'm very tired during this week. So fatigue, exhaustion, difficulty sleeping. So these are all the sort of things that we might be experiencing during week 4. So improving mood and sleep is 2 great goals for this week. And including, there are foods that actually, I call them serotonin boosters. So serotonin is a neurotransmitter and it also acts as a hormone. Its nickname is the happy hormone, right? So adding foods into our nutrition plan that boost serotonin, that's going to improve our mood. So leafy greens, eggs, cashews, tofu are great additions. Also, important to bear in mind here is that cortisol, the stress hormone, is increasing. So this is going to impact our body's ability to shift into fat burn. And with cortisol, when the body has this sort of elevated cortisol level, the stress hormone, we don't want to put the body in any more sort of stressful situations. So this is a week I would suggest any woman who's incorporating fasting, intermittent fasting as a strategy to maintain their weight, to reach their health goals. This is a week I would say, just be careful you're sort of extending that fasting window too long and putting that body into stress response. We don't really want that when the cortisol's already elevated. So also, other things like processed food, alcohol, too much caffeine, that's also going to impact our cortisol. So trying to see, can we reduce the alcohol here? Can we reduce the processed food? Stick to the wholesome food. Again, slow absorption carbohydrates, the protein that we mentioned, fiber, staying hydrated. But with sleep, so that mentioning the foods that sort of improve our mood, but with sleep, sort of promoting good sleep, fighting this fatigue that we might have in week 4, dark chocolate. That's a great one to add in here. That's high in magnesium. We've got magnesium-rich foods such as bananas as well, spinach, pumpkin seeds. I feel like I've mentioned spinach a lot, but spinach really is a superfood, right? I mean, it's got so much goodness in it. So spinach, and if you don't like spinach, I found a way to just add that into my smoothies with a banana. And there we go. We've got 2 magnesium-rich foods in there, and even dark cacao, which again is the 3rd food I've just listed here with magnesium. So there are ways you can sort of hide the spinach in. So promoting sleep, promoting serotonin boosters in our nutrition, great place to start. Again, Don, I mean, I feel like I have friends who got a lot of energy during this week, and then there are others like myself that just like, oh God, I don't want to do anything. And also, some women, we can feel the stress. We can feel the stress hormones increasing, and we're feeling a little bit agitated, a little bit anxious. What can we do when it comes to exercise and stress? When it comes to exercise and stress, what should we be focusing on here? Because again, there's a fine line, right? Exercising to help alleviate stress, but then some exercise can
100%. Training's a stress. We forget that training's a stress, and there's always this line, this barrier that we can cross that can become just way too much, right? And all of our levels are going to change, but at a certain point, like when people ask me, "Well, I'm sick, can I train?" And I'm like, "Well, sometimes light exercise can be helpful." But if you come in too hard, then your body's going to be too stressed out and it's not going to recover. And in a way, I'm not saying this is similar to that phase, but I think we really want to be mindful. Getting our steps is something that's very powerful. I think just going for a walk on your grass in the backyard, barefooted, and just breathing in the air, getting in some vitamin D, very important. Now, some people might turn around and they might feel incredible and they might feel, the mood to go and train, and this is going to make them feel better. I'm not going to tell them not to do that. I will not, especially if they leave that session feeling better. But I think cut yourself some slack during this final, week, and, be mindful of how you're feeling. Understand that at the very least, going for nice, long, relaxing walks, putting your headphones on, maybe, multitasking and making a phone call to a loved one or a relative while you're walking. I've got a nice little walk to the beach that I know my wife and I will do all the time, and we can sit there and talk, and you'll get a nice 3 miles of steps in, and it's not intense. My heart rate's not really exceeding 90 beats a minute. So exercise, activity like that is what I really am hoping that we can, that most women can do at the very least.
Improve our mental health, de-stress, but then again, we're getting that exercise in to, right. The cardiovascular benefits are there. So yeah, that's really great advice. Wow, we covered every phase with some nutrition tips and some exercise tips. That was great.
Thank you. And I'm learning so much from you, Mia. So thank you so much.
We've done talks in the past where we also covered menopause. And so Don is becoming a women's health specialist very quickly here.
Trying.
It was lovely
like I said,
to have you.
I'm learning a lot from you, but thank you. Thanks for having me on as always.